I don't know if we decided who was gonna run this meeting, and we're now realizing.
Oh, I guess so. I guess we're supposed to elect the chair. And we've got everybody on board now, right?
You have to appoint the chair.
Appoint the chair? Who appoints?
You guys.
We as
You as the decide who the chair is.
us as the committee,
Mhm.
or us as the committee appoints the chair.
The chair has to be a board member.
It has to be a board member, yes.
I see.
So between the two of you,
Great.
you can arm wrestle if you want.
How would you like to be chair?
I'm okay with it. I'm also happy to have you continue.
Thank you. I would be grateful if you would serve in that capacity, if that's okay.
Okay. You're gonna knight me now and
Yes,
make it official.
That would be-
The most cordial political campaign of all time.
No, you take it. Oh, no, you. Okay. All right. So I guess
That
Do we
work
need to have a vote on this, or we just,
You should.
we should,
Yeah,
okay.
have a formal vote.
okay, well, I'll nominate Bob Russ as chair.
We could call the meeting to order first.
Oh,
That's
you have to
right.
call the over meeting.
You know, I heard the discussion at the last meeting and I knew that this was supposed to be on the agenda, as I
It
recall,
was supposed to be.
but it is not.
It is
So
not.
don't
I
think we
noticed
can
that.
Take any action.
So we're doing the best we can, and at the moment, we're deciding who's going to run this meeting, and so
Okay.
I propose that Bob, you serve as interim chair.
Interim, okay, for this meeting.
And
And then I guess we don't have, I guess we just have to request, oh, okay, Sherry, you're taking notes, great. So we can get it into the next meeting agenda.
Yeah.
Right,
fantastic,
put it on the agenda.
thank you.
Okay. All right, well, in my I guess in my interim capacity as the person running or chairing this meeting, I guess I'd like to convene the meeting, the Budget and Finance Committee for October 8th. And can we get a roll call?
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
that's me.
yeah.
Okay,
You're also it.
I was not prepared for this, but that's all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Bear with me one moment. We have Jim Mosher,
Here,
Bob Russ,
Here?
Brian Largay,
Yes,
Jenny Gomez,
Here.
and Mike Galvin.
Here.
Everyone's present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, so we're going through the package that was distributed to everybody. And don't think there's any we didn't have any closed sessions, so there's no changes there. Oral communication, none. Let's see, no, I don't think. Yeah, we don't, wait, am I on the right one? Yeah,
probably ask if there's any.
oh, wait, I'm on the wrong one, so sorry. Here we go. Changes to the agenda. That's what it was. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda, Jason? Okay, all right. So now it's open for any oral communications for items that are not on the agenda. And I think the only agenda item is the capital reserve policy. Any public comments? Do we have anyone online, Scott?
No.
No, okay. All right. Okay, then move on to new business, which is the reserve policy. Oh, boy.
All right,
Okay, so
The
you're on again.
the item that's before you today is the reserve policy that we've discussed previously. At the September 18th board meeting, there were some questions raised about an increase in reserves. After doing some research, I realized that it was not an increase of new reserves. It was just a reimbursement from loan received. So before we received the $15 million loan, we advanced about 1.5 million for projects. And then once we received the money from the loan, then we just reimbursed the district and restored our reserves. Based on previous feedback that we received from the board, we changed the operating reserve to 4 months of operating expenses and the capital reserve to 5 million. and we left the emergency reserve at 4 million. And so with that, it is open for your discussion.
All right, who would like to dive in? Any volunteers?
Well, maybe I'll speak to this a little bit for those on the committee who may have missed the discussion at the last board meeting. What Sherry's referring to is the observation that over the past 10 years or so, the finances of the district fluctuated, as you might expect, with major projects and in response to various disasters. And we kind of had them all over the past 10 years. And at one point, the funds remaining dipped as low as $1.9 million, if I recall correctly. And then almost immediately thereafter, in the next couple months, a very substantial injection of funds appeared on the district books, replenishing that to, I forget if it was 4 million or 5
It was
million.
like 3.2, I believe.
3.2. So it recovered fairly quickly. And the question was put forward, could there be a scenario where the funds available dipped and then did not recover very quickly? Perhaps that recovery was due to a FEMA reimbursement, and with FEMA flat on its back, we could no longer count on that type of rescue. And so this is, Sherry did the analysis, it appears, to understand what was the nature of that reimbursement, and it was not a grant or a FEMA funding, it was a loan that the district had prepared for that purpose. And so it was not a surprise, and is something under our control. So thank you for doing that analysis. That's encouraging. I guess in terms of the question before us, what I understand is that we're asked to approve a reserve policy that would have these three main components: an operating reserve of 4 months of operating expenses. And I think that's about $3 to $3.5 million.
It's about 2.5,
$2.5 million would be 4 months. Thank you.
I believe so.
Okay.
Or maybe it is 3 now. It's 10 million, right?
10 million.
We're operating 10 million.
So about 3.3.
Okay, so you were correct, right?
Okay, about 3.3 million would be the operating reserve. The capital reserve would be a $5 million capital reserve. The emergency reserve would be the $4 million emergency reserve. And then what I'm still trying to understand is those reserves are all under the one reserve policy, but they are then set into restricted accounts used solely for specific purposes, like an operating reserve, a capital reserve, and emergency reserve. I'm not sure if that's a correct understanding, or if it's all one big account called the reserve. And then related to that is my curiosity about the capital reserve, which I understand to be this usable, spendable reserve, where the idea would be the capital reserve, it's put into that account, but then the intention is to spend it on capital projects and then replenish it over time. Whereas the way I conceptualize it, emergency reserve, you kind of don't touch until a declared emergency. And I don't know how exactly that works, who declares it and that sort of thing, but that would be, and then the operating reserve perhaps also gets set aside and not touched until some operating reserve emergency. I wonder if you might just help explain all of that a little bit.
Yeah, the board would declare the emergency.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll let Sherry speak, or Cherie, sorry. You guys got me going there, but she can speak to how the accounting would work as far as the differentiating between the three accounts.
Yeah, so typically it's not recommended to put them in restricted accounts, just because that really does tie your hand. And so it's more appropriate to maybe just have one restricted account that says reserves. And then we can keep track of each individual reserve through that amount. But for example, if you were to put things in a restricted account, say, you know, you had your three restricted accounts, and then there was a big emergency. All of that money really needs to be available for us in case of an emergency. And in doing the 3 separate accounts, we wouldn't be able to pull from the capital reserves or the operating reserves if needed. It would only be the emergency reserves. And so that's why you don't really want to tie your hand, so to speak. So that would be my recommendation. I would have to talk with our auditors just to make sure they're on the same page, but that's what I've done in my previous agencies.
Okay, thank you,
You're welcome.
Sherry. And and so if I understand correctly, the idea would be, it would be one reserve to hold these funds. And then in the monthly statements, they may be tracked individually as components of that reserve.
Correct.
Great. And then and so I guess the bottom line for me is that I hope that we're in a position to have the capital reserve cycle so that on an annual basis, maybe not spending $5 million every year. That would be amazing if we could foreseeably replenish that, but to chip away at our big backlog of capital projects. And in particular, the capital reserve amount proposed at the September 18th board meeting was $2 million for the capital reserve. And now it's being proposed for $5 million. And that's a bigger number. If that were to lead those funds to be frozen in some way, then I would be worried. If that is essentially saying they're not frozen, but instead dedicated to capital projects, and they can cycle and be spent on capital projects, then I feel more comfortable. Can you help me understand that a little bit and why the number is different from a few weeks ago and kind of the implication of that?
Okay, I don't remember who.
I mean, the
suggested
2
it.
million going to 5.
Right,
Yeah.
2 million.
So
going to 5.
the shift on the numbers is from lowering, for one thing, lowering the operations reserve from the 6 months to the 4 months. So that shifted about $1.5 million over. And then the target was based on just kind of an analysis over the next 5 years of the CIP, what the current projected debt looks like, and 5 million was the target number that we came up with.
I see. Gotcha. And so for budgeting purposes, let's say that the capital reserve, we start the year at 5 million and we spend it down to 1 million or something like that over the course of a year. Since our reserve policy says we are supposed to have 5 million in that category, does the next budget kind of have a mandated replenishment of the 4 million that was spent from that? Do we have to like go right back? And
I'll let Sherry speak to how she's done in the past, but at my previous employment, it was a goal, a target. It wasn't necessarily you had to have that in there, but that's what you were striving to have in there at all times.
And in the policy, it says, in the proposed policy, it says funds will be replenished within 2 to 3 years.
gotcha. Thank you for, sorry, I didn't read that.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay, so we could spend it and then have 2 to 3 years to replenish it.
Okay.
And I guess, Jason, you mentioned having money, that the goal would be to have it there at all times. And I guess that's what makes me a little bit nervous is at all times would imply that we don't want to dip below it. But I think it's so
It is
yeah. How do we?
kind of it's basically a cushion that it's your savings account that you're being able to draw off of while you're getting projects started, while your monthly rate revenue is coming in to replenish that.
I see.
How it works.
Gotcha. So dipping into that is okay for up to 2 or 3 years, but the idea is on that type
Yeah,
of
you're setting
timescale.
setting your rates to accommodate the 5-year look ahead on your capital project. So we're factoring in, maybe we're going to take out $19 million in a debt issuance, right? So what does that look like as far as that's going to cost the district $2 million a year in paying the debt back? what does that allow us for cash capital? In other words, that difference between paying your debt and money left over to get capital projects going as well. So we're working off that $19 million, but the cash capital is coming in from rate revenue. And that's where you're setting your reserve target that you will follow the ebb and flow of projects as they're being developed.
Okay, great. Thank you for explaining that. And that's all I have for questions.
Thank you. Jim?
I had the same kind of confusion that Brian had about, seems to me the capital reserve is fundamentally different from the other two in the sense that the other two for emergencies and for operations, you want that money available at all times, whereas the capital, you want to spend it. You know, so I just had the same confusion and I appreciate the explanation, but in my previous employment, of course, we didn't have a lot of capital projects, but the reserve was simply the emergency fund. And I wouldn't want us to be holding $5 million away, holding it while we have capital projects to work on because we have to have it in reserve. It seems to me you want that flowing. So it was just confusing me how it was labeled.
Yeah,
I'm
so
not
you
sure
have
why they're in the same
yeah,
account.
you have restricted reserve, which a lot of times boards set up as you
Yeah.
can't touch that, right? That's only for that. This is more of an unrestricted reserve, meaning that you can go get the money when you need it and then replenish it as you
But
can.
I would hope the board wouldn't touch the emergency reserve unless there was an emergency. Anyway,
Okay.
that's my only comment.
Go ahead.
I guess the question I have is, the board sent it to us for reconsideration. Was it just on this issue of where the $1.5 million, what you explained at the beginning? Was that why it
That
was
was
sent to us?
the main reason.
Okay.
yes.
Right.
Some new parameters. Jenny, would you like to?
But so this is going back to the board because you're asking for changes to the reserve policy. And can you just articulate what exactly are the changes you're asking the board to approve?
So back when this was approved in 2021, it was based on a governmental fund. We do not have governmental funds. We have enterprise funds as a special district. So the way that is, the way that the reserves are calculated is different. And so that was what originally started this process was, we need to make sure that our reserve policy is actually following our fund type.
Mhm.
And then from there, it's just been discussions about, what we want the amounts to be, and little changes here and there. But that is the main change, and then the amounts as well.
So it's more just sort of an administrative kind of a change where you're not this type of a reserve anymore, you're that type. But as far as the reserve, it's just you're kind of unrestricting the two pots of money and adjusting a little bit.
Yeah, I believe in the old policy, there's 6 categories of different reserves. And we're reducing that to 3 just to eliminate some confusion as well. And even more restrictions.
But the
And-
substantive amount that's in the reserve and in those separate pots is not going to change substantially.
I don't,
Well, I do recall some of the numbers, if you don't mind me
oh,
jumping
sure,
in.
go ahead.
I think one of the old policy, and this is a big thing that the Budget and Finance Committee iterated on like 2 or 3 months ago and said, wait, this is a big issue, is that the old policy was to set aside for capital reserve 2.5% of our infrastructure. And we had on the books it at about 150 million. And it was questioned, is that really what, if we had to replace this infrastructure, our pipes, our tanks, our water treatment plants, what would it really cost us now if we had to replace it? And the number we got is probably in excess of 500 million, $500 million. And so when we applied the 2.5% to that, it came to a capital reserve of 11 million, $12 million, which means that we're already negative and we need to borrow money just to try to hold the reserve. So it wasn't practical. And so I think it got sort of, and Sherry has joined us to try to help us wrestle this python and figure out how to deal with it. And so the iteration that she has proposed here is not that 11 or $12 million number, because you could make that argument on what's required for us to maintain our infrastructure. You could make that argument, but that's not what the capital reserve is. It's not about maintenance. It's about what do we need in an emergency, a flood, an earthquake, something like that, where we lose a bunch of infrastructure and we need to get on it. And so this is kind of a compromise, I suppose. It's a 5 million of capital reserve, about 3.3 million of the operating, and then 4 million emergency. So it still works out to about 12 million and change.
Mhm.
So it's still a big number, but not as big as it would have been. I think it was like at 16 if we just use the old numbers. But we had never considered that we actually have $500 million worth of infrastructure. We were just looking at the book value, and that's different.
Right.
All right. So I don't know if that helps. or not.
Appreciation and
Yeah,
all of that.
okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any other
I
thoughts?
think that-
Okay, Mike.
questions.
I just want to confirm with the capital reserve, increasing it to 5 million. Is there expected reduction in delays in, funding and capital improvement projects from having this reserve kind of beefed up and available? Just the flow of capital improvement, do you think it will increase, be more efficient?
Yeah, that's the idea, right? Is that you're not going to be handcuffed by waiting for debt financing or something. You can get projects started at the same time that you're waiting for the debt to be issued. So that should be coming to the board fairly soon. The subject of debt issuance, but this is something that will be set up as, like I said, it's like a cushion that you can go in and get as you need it,
Mhm.
while you're waiting for your monthly income to sustain it.
Okay,
Okay. Any other questions, Mike?
nope, that's it.
Okay. I just had a few. Yeah, I guess I want to echo, I think the point that Jim and Brian both brought up, which is, we obviously need to set aside a reasonable reserve for the emergencies that will undoubtedly happen. But I also hate to have our hands tied, like with a $5 million capital reserve versus 2 million or some other number. So maybe if you wouldn't mind just going over that again, if let's say in the next month or two, after we look at the prioritized construction projects and how the bond funds funnel into that and what our priorities are, if we have a 5 million reserve, capital reserve policy, would that preclude us then, when you do the net calculations of what available funds there are from our working capital? If we have that $5 million number, does that really mean we can't go into it? If we decide, let's say as a board, that no, we really want to spend some of that down this year and then hopefully, build it back up next year. What are your thoughts? I mean, I guess how binding is this idea?
Sure, so
Yeah.
because if we put it in a restricted account, we do have to have board approval to remove it from that account. But the way that I'm envisioning this is when we bring forward the next budget, we can say, we want to do these projects and this is where the funding has come from, but also we want to do these other projects and we'll use reserves for them. And so you would, as the board would then know, we are depleting the $5 million reserves for these specific projects. And then we would allow the reserves to be built back up to the 5 million. So the next budget cycle, we probably wouldn't budget any of the reserves.
So, but for clarity, we've already approved the next 2-year budget, right?
Correct.
So I guess so that's like 3 years from now, right? When
It could be, or it could be a budget adjustment.
Okay,
If there was a project that we really wanted to do and we have the 5 million in there, then we could come to the board with a budget adjustment if we so wanted
For
to.
example, if one of the tank projects came up and we want to get it done now, even though it's in fiscal year 28, that reserve, we bring it to the board and say, we want to do a budget adjustment and pull out of the reserves to do this project.
okay, so the board could say, yeah, this is important enough, it's a high enough priority that we're gonna reduce the 5 million to 3 million and spend 2 million on a new tank. Okay.
Knowing that we're not gonna do it in the originally scheduled time frame, and that would then build those reserves back up.
Okay, all right, I'm glad to hear that. I was actually quite worried about that issue. And let's see, what else? I think it might just be maybe some older tables, Cherie, but I think what's shown in the package aren't quite accurate to reflect this policy that we're discussing. Because what I was trying to, and I think it's on page, where was it? And so maybe it's just a matter of correcting the record the next time around, but let's see, let me get to the right page. Shoot. What is it? On page 20, where it's showing, here it shows both in the current cycle, next fiscal year, and then the following fiscal year, 26, 27. So you'll notice that the capital reserve amount in the bottom 1/3 is 11 million, which is the number I had referred to as being the old policy. And so maybe this just should be labeled as, I don't know, of not an old policy, but it would have been, if we had applied the 2021 policy to updated numbers, this is the spreadsheet that would have been in place. And you'll notice at the very bottom that in this fiscal year, we're 2.6 million behind. Right, and then 900,000 behind next fiscal year, and finally a little positive. And the positive number means that that is money that the board could immediately apply to construction projects. Whereas if we're negative here, I think that outside of the board amending the reserve policy, I think that means we can't touch it. So I want to make sure that this is updated to be the policy that we're currently talking about. And I think I did a quick calculation. And just so everyone knows, I think for the fiscal year that just ended a couple months ago, it works out to we would be positive 1.8 million. So that says the board could spend 1.8 million last fiscal year. That grows to 2.8 million this coming, the fiscal year we're now in, and actually 5.7 million the following fiscal year. So I like seeing those bigger positive numbers, because that means that's money we can definitely then budget for and hopefully line up with projects, the CIP. And if the board has access to some of that 5 million, if we really decide as a priority we need to, then that even gives us a little more. So I just think we need to update that table so that it's in the record accordingly. Okay. Okay. And I guess just to throw this out for the committee and Jason, you too, I was trying to think of the only disaster we haven't suffered yet, and I don't know what it was like in '89 with the Loma Prieta
Better be
quake.
knocking on wood. Here we go.
What?
So I better start knocking on wood now.
Yeah, I know. Is I was thinking, wow, what if we actually got hit by the big one, and this is maybe a question for engineering and whatnot, but and I know as we upgrade our tanks, I guess questions would be, have we ever sat down and sort of figured out in a, let's say, a quake disaster, because we now have experience with some of the other disasters, but in a quake disaster, what would be the likely infrastructure that we would lose? I could certainly imagine pipes being severed, but I think that's a pretty
So that
quick fix.
You'll see that on the new construction
Okay,
at like bridges or at tanks, you have the earthquake, so they have room to move, right?
Ah, okay.
So yes,
and then
severing.
what are the tanks? What are they?
So the new regulation on tanks is that they have a higher freeboard. So they're a little bit taller than they used to be, allow
Right.
for the sloshing factor.
And do you know if they are rated for a particular, I guess, seismic motion, a Richter locally or something? I was trying to look that up.
Yeah, I want to say that when we did ours after the 7.1 in Ridgecrest, I want to say it was an 8.0 that it was rated for. So it's supposed to be indestructible.
That's really, really good. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so again, maybe that's something to throw at engineering. Maybe it's part of the CIP analysis. I'm just thinking about maybe being a little proactive in planning for a
All
disaster.
new construction will have earthquake fixtures, whether in tanks and everything like that. We'll have a connection that allows for movement.
And how many tanks that we have currently aren't in that category?
Well,
They're
probably
like,
a majority of them,
like,
I'd say
yeah.
95% at least.
okay, we only have like one or two, right, that are
That are
new
brand new.
steel tanks, if that. Okay, yeah,
Oh, the welded steel, yeah, there's only 2 that I know of.
yeah. Okay,
Uh,
so everything else is pretty vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think that ends my questions, and we'll open it up to the public. Bruce.
Hi, I'm Bruce Holloway from Boulder Creek. I got a little confused by the beginning of the discussion too. It sounds like 5 million isn't really a reserve. I mean, the general manager and Director Largay were kind of saying different things as far as I could tell. The general manager wants to call it a reserve, but it was made very clear that it's going to be spent. And I think I completely agree with Mr. Mocher and what his comments were. The problem with the reserve fund policy that I've seen all along is when you say there's this big slice that's somehow based on capital investment and you call that a reserve, then it stands in the way of actually spending the money on capital investment. So it's like an obstacle instead of something good. Let me give you an example of a reserve that I think, a capital reserve that I think does make sense. The fire district down the street, about a year ago, I don't keep up with them that much, but about a year ago, they were talking about ordering a new fire truck. And I can't remember the exact amount. It was close to $1 million. It might have been 650,000. I can't remember the exact amount, but I'll call it roughly $1 million. And they needed to order the fire truck 4 years in advance. And there were different ways of financing it. But what they decided to do was go ahead and order the thing the way they wanted it. And they're going to do their own financing. So they needed a capital reserve for that truck. It's already on order. They can't have it. It was going to be I think it's 3 years now. So if they had a $1 million capital reserve at the fire district, that would mean that 3 years from now, they could actually pay for the fire truck that's on order. So that makes sense. Everybody understands it's in reserve. Everybody understands that it's going to connect to something in 3 years. And you better not spend it because you sure don't want to get 3 years down the road and find out you can't pay for the fire truck when it takes 4 years to order one. So that's an example where it really is a true reserve. They truly need to put that money in reserve so that they have it when they need to pay for the truck. So this isn't a reserve to me. If it's $5 million that you think you can spend in the next 12 months, that's not a reserve. That's not what I call a reserve. Now I've been thinking about what should the amount of the reserve be. The way that it was going at the board meeting was it was going to be like $11 million or going up to 11.5 million in the next year. And that seems a little on the high side to me. you know, the fire, the CGU fire was the last big disaster. And it looks like the district needed about 4 million to weather that. That year after that happened. I was thinking it was more like 5, and so I was thinking, well, maybe the next big disaster should be 10. But maybe it could be less. Because I'm really concerned about getting capital projects done. I don't think you should have a reserve fund policy that is so restrictive that you're just looking at $1 and $2 million little annual capital expenses. You've got to be able to spend a lot more per year on capital expenses. So, so really, I guess what I would say is what this proposal is $7.3 million. It's 4 million for the emergencies and 3.3 for the operating reserve. That's 7.3. But that 5 million, the way you described it, that's not a reserve. That's not a reserve at all. Now, 7.3 might be a good number. It might actually be a good number, even though I think it probably would be better if it were closer to 10. And I'm going to say one more thing about that. So I've been looking at the fire districts, and a lot of fire districts wind up using this, this thing called dry period financing. There's something in the state constitution that says that any district can essentially borrow up to 85% of their next year's revenue. So for a fire district, Boulder Creek Fire District gets about $1 million a year. That's their whole operating budget. Maybe I'm taking the wrong district because I think it's actually higher than for them, but let's just say roughly $1 million a year. And that's almost entirely property tax revenue. So according to the state constitution, they can access dry period financing of up to 85% of that, which would be $850,000. Now, this district also gets over $1 million in property tax. So this district would be able to borrow using dry period financing, $850,000, more than that, probably close to $1 million using dry period financing. Now, for fire districts, dry period financing is mostly based on their property tax revenue because that's almost all the revenue they have. But this district has a lot more revenue than property tax revenue. And when I went and looked at the section in the state constitution about dry period financing, it says revenue. It doesn't say property tax revenue. It says revenue. And your revenue, so it's like more than 5 million. I mean, so it could be that the district could, in an emergency or in the aftermath of an emergency, it could be that this district could access dry period financing on the order of millions of dollars. Maybe. I mean, I think we should check it out and figure out if that's possible. Now, the way dry period financing works, you have to put in your request in April, as I understand it, and you have to pay it back by April. So if your disaster happened in May, that would be a long time to wait to be able to access dry period financing. So I'm not sure if it's completely appropriate, but it's something. And that something to me means that maybe you don't need $10 million in reserves. Maybe you really can make do with 7.3 or 8 or some other number like that. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, let's go at another round.
Yeah, could I?
Yes, please.
So, so I just want to acknowledge the expertise in the room. Sherry and Jason, who've worked in this field for decades, and acknowledge that common perception about what a capital reserve is or is not nearly as important as its actual definition as used in special districts. Fortunately, Google does a great job of informing people about jargon, and my search suggests that, according to Google, a capital reserve fund allows a special district to save money for long-term investments such as replacing equipment, building new facilities, and covering large one-time expenses. By planning ahead, a district can avoid taking on expensive debt or relying on unpredictable yearly revenue for major projects. Key functions of a capital reserve: funding large capital projects, replacing aging infrastructure, covering emergency repairs, providing matching funds to grants, improving credit ratings, stabilizing long-term finances. Important distinctions, capital reserves versus operating reserves, as we've discussed. It's at any rate, I think we should all just use the jargon clearly in common use by special districts, calling the capital reserve what it is, this internal savings account for capital projects, and appreciate that what's on the table is a $5 million allocation to that capital reserve, substantially more than the 2 million that was proposed in September, with the implication of that being that the intent is to have a large internal revolving fund with significant capacity to implement major projects. So I guess I just want to, as I'm learning in real time here, I appreciate the work done on this. I think the only thing that I would appreciate would be language in the memo that educates people like me beforehand to save us this process of education about what it means. And my understanding that what's intended is a capital reserve accounting that will fluctuate up and down as we spend it and replenish it. And then operating reserve and emergency reserve accounting that will hopefully show those being held in some type of a lockbox pending the disaster that they're set aside for. So that's
No,
how I
great,
see it.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Jim, did you have any? other?
No further comment.
Okay. Jenny, anything else? No. And Mike?
So it sounds like the key word that you said is flexibility. And it's not necessarily just an emergency, the big one. If that does happen, it can go towards that. But otherwise, in normal years without fires and large earthquakes, it can also, fund projects that were maybe unforeseen or like, on the backlog. Or like you said, just deal with debt in terms of, projects and the way they are funded are not always straightforward and the timing in which you get received. So it sounds like it's just a large $5 million fund of flexibility for the district, which, it sounds favorable to me, and I like that it's not locked up for emergency only, where it's sitting there not being, used on a year to year. So that kind of gives me, a little bit of confidence. If that's correct. If I misspoke about it in any way, please do correct my perspective.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the idea, and Sheree explained it perfectly, in the fact that we have money sitting there that wasn't necessarily for a project that wasn't, the project was 3 years down the road.
Mhm.
And something came up where we got to do it now. We have the reserve for it.
Or you mentioned grants, but there's a lot of grants that, you have to match the funding. If we found a grant that we could get and we had to match $1 million, we have it ready to go.
Right, isn't that powerful? And most grants are on a reimbursement basis also.
Sure.
So even if you
Absolutely.
have the grant, you still need the money first.
Mike, any other
No.
comments?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm still struggling with the 5 million, what is called by way of jargon, capital reserves. And in looking back, right, at the CZU fire, we did spend between 4 and 5 million, and actually on top of some other pretty big disasters between floods and some wind damage that we suffered, right? And we were able to get through those without, I think, impacting the working capital too much. So it does make me wonder if maybe we're calling the $5 million number, we're mislabeling. And I guess I'd just like to float with the committee the idea that we drop that to 2 million, back to the old number, and we keep the 4 months of operating reserves and then the 4 million emergency. So that would give us 9 9.3 million of total, what I would call more like real emergency reserves. Because that is twice as much as we spent on the CZU fire. It gives us, I think, a lot of headroom. And the reason I kind of like it is it then adds 3 million to the bottom line on those numbers I had just mentioned earlier about monies that actually would be immediately available pending board approval and for construction projects. Because that has been, I think, a real priority of the district and this committee and the board for a while now. So I don't know what maybe we just open that up for other committee members. We can certainly approve a $5 million capital reserve number with the idea that if the board can always say, well, we're going to use some of this, but it just seems like that's kind of tying our hands halfway maybe. And it might be a little better to just put it at 2 million. That still gives us 9.3 million that we're holding in reserve and wouldn't touch unless we really had to. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I gave some thought to that too. And the way I envision it is the scenario A, as you just described, would have 7.3 million in a, I don't know, in an emergency category of reserve, and then 2 million in this buffer that could be spent down for a capital project and then replenished for the capital project. And so the total reserve or amount in reserve would fluctuate between 7.3 and 9.3 as those projects are done and replenishment happens. The alternative, the one on the proposed today, would have it fluctuate, would have a 7.3 million as the base, and then it could fluctuate as high as 12.3 and then down to 7.3. And what are the differences between that? In the second case, at its maximum, we have a $5 million war chest for capital improvement projects instead of a 2 million. And it compels future boards to replenish the entirety of that $5 million war chest for capital projects as the standard expectation. And what that means is that instead of having the capacity to do relatively small projects, you have the capacity to do pretty big projects. If we just set it to a $2 million capital reserve, that would give the current board the opportunity to, for better, for worse, spend the $3 million difference in a one-time push, making the budget look good for a year or two. But then, unless there's a lot of discipline, never get back to rebuilding a significant capital reserve to do the next tranche of big projects. And I think, so that's one reason why I like the larger capital reserve, is because it's kind of the recognition that this capital project thing is going to be the urgent work of the district for the next 20 years.
And I guess just practically speaking, thinking about the numbers, if we did that and had to replenish it in 2 to 3 years, because now we're really not using it for emergencies, we're simply spending it on capital projects. And so if it's been labeled as a capital reserve, it presumably would need to be replenished in 2 to 3 years. And the only thing that replenishes it is either FEMA, because it really was a disaster, in which case we actually used it for what its purpose was. If it's just simply building, steel tanks a little sooner than not, or those kinds of things, the only source of cash are our revenues. And according to Sherry's projections, that'll be a little less than 3 million this year, and I think was 5 million next year, or 4.5 million next year. So, and I guess, and so I understand that from a philosophical point of view, but I guess at the end of the day, as the board is still going to have to decide, what are the projects we need to do? What are the highest priorities? And whether we say, well, some of this 5 million is going to be spent this year on them or not, I think the board still has to make that decision, because the board will have the ability to spend, let's say, with the $2 million number, it makes it, and I'm gonna, in my mind, I'm kind of keeping the 2 million as a real number, that we really kind of hold on to that. The board could always say, oh, this is such an important project, we need to just jump on it and spend that 2 million. So in my mind, I'm thinking it really frees up 3 million, which gives us 5 million this fiscal year and 7 million next. And well, but if we spent it, then it's really only giving us, if we spent 5 million this year, we only have less than 3 million next year, and then 4.5 the following year. That's it for our 3 years worth of capital projects. And so I guess my worry is that I guess I'm trying to avoid putting the board in a position where it actually has to go on record saying we are going to spend this quote capital reserve, because by your definition, that really should be earmarked for particular projects. And the fire truck is a great example where you set up like an auto replacement. You know, your auto has 5 years of life, so you put aside 20% every year, building up the reserve so you can then buy it. We're not really doing that. We're really just prioritizing construction projects and deciding which ones are going to be built this year, next year, and the following year, right? And then if we do float a bond, what else can we do, you know, in that time frame? And so I guess what I'm struggling with is I understand the philosophical idea of we've got the 5 million, but if we go into it thinking, well, we're going to be spending 5 million, then it's not really a reserve, and I don't think it meets the definition either. And I think maybe it would make the board be a little reticent to go in there, whereas maybe lowering it to 2 million, maybe that's more of a true reserve, and it gives us that 3 million in increased working capital that we can tackle these things. That's kind of a thought on, because I've been going back and forth on what the best way to deal with this is. So Jim, we haven't heard from you on this 2 versus 5. Any thoughts?
Well, I think I think I'm more comfortable with the 5 million. Thinking that the emergency reserve of 7.4 is that's the money we need to have set aside in case of an emergency, and that as I understand it, the 5 million is just floating to cover projects. And like Brian's argument that we want to have that be a relatively big number because we have big projects, and it's also what the staff is recommending. And since I don't have any expertise in this, I'm also inclined to defer to staff recommendation on this.
Okay. No, thank you. Jenny and Jason, Sherry and Jason, from your experience, if something is called a capital reserve, say 5 million, do you see any issues at all arising if the board decides we just want to use all of it and spend it down in a year? I mean, are we setting ourselves up for some issues, or do you see no problem with that?
Normally, when you go into your capital reserve, it's for a reason, right? Some project that you did not foresee in your budget cycle.
Not a normally
Not a
scheduled
normally scheduled project. And there's a reason for going into it. Setting it at 2 puts it low. Like if a tank came up, I don't know if I could do it for $2 million. So that's the worry, because then you get into a point of we have this list of projects that we're going to do. I'm going to have to cut one now because this came up, which is it's possible. So having the larger reserve does give us a little bit of that cushion of we have this. These are already budgeted for. We can now move this without cutting the throat on this one. And people thought this was going to get done, and now it's not going to get done.
Right, but if we really had the 7.3 base and then 2 million on top of that, doesn't that provide that extra, you know?
When you're looking at that, I'm looking at that 2 million as my capital reserve. I'm not touching my 4, and I'm not touching my 3.3 as my operations budget. So that's if we somehow lose revenue, that's what that's for. The emergency is when the board declares an emergency, and then I can touch that 4. Otherwise, I have $2 million in which projects that are not currently budgeted for could be pulled from.
Okay, I guess what I had understood you to say is that it's not on the current list, but something comes up, which I guess I'm thinking, well, that's an emergency. We had a failure and so we need to spend that 2 million
Yeah, that.
on the tank.
Now you're getting into the definition of emergency, right? Like, I
Okay,
mean,
fair enough, fair enough. Right. And I guess, I mean, I'm sure there are some,
yeah.
standards
You-
for it.
I don't want to conflate emergency with important. You know, yeah, it's important that we get this tank online, but is it an emergency? I don't know.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the key question. I mean, do we really, could the board say that something arguably is an emergency and they can tap that, part of that 7.3 plus the 2, or are they really limited to the 2 for a capital emergency? I guess I don't know. Okay. Jenny, any other thoughts?
I think a lot of people are using the CZU as how much do we need and reserve? And I don't think that's the high watermark personally.
Right.
And I think, more is better. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I feel kind of conservative as far as that goes. And I don't want to be all doomsaying, but yeah, I think, there are potentially bigger disasters on the horizon, and an earthquake, a big one, would be one of those. And, I also don't think that we can count on the federal funds the way that we have in the past as well. And that's a big deal, I think, and a big reason to, be conservative in our reserves.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. All right. Mike, any other thoughts?
Yeah, something you brought up. I would like to know a little bit more about the reserve replenishment. So 5 million being a big number, say, something large, you spend it all the way down to 1. How much strain does that put on the next 2 years with the expectation of getting it back to 5 in 2 to 3 years? Like, is that directly taking from revenue mostly, or can you walk me through, like, your experience with how that is replenished, and if it does strain the system over the next 2 years to try and get it back?
I've never taken the reserves down to 20% of their capacity before. But yes, it would put a substantial, it basically limit your cash capital for the next 2 years. You wouldn't be doing any projects, to Bob's point, in those next 2 years, you'd be refunding the reserves.
Okay. Well, what is the threshold that the minimum
And we're talking
threshold?
about 2 and 5, and just so everybody knows that number, those aren't like the number set in stone. There's a lot of numbers in between, so.
Right. There are a few numbers in between.
So 1 million at a $5 million rate, you're looking at 20%, you're like, that's extreme. 2 million, 1 million starts looking a lot more feasible to 50%, you gotta pay 1 million back.
Yeah, you set your reserves based on the idea of, maybe 1 or 2 projects, and
Mhm.
5 million seems like a good number for 1 or 2 projects, to give you the cushion.
Mhm.
We're just gotta bid in for constructing a tank, and it's probably gonna be, when all said and done, about $1.5 million to do it.
Which would have been really uncomfortable at a $2 million clip.
It would have been tight.
I know you guys are just coming into the district, but are there examples in recent years where, we couldn't do something, or we had to cut something else because we had a slimmer capital reserve? Or did you hear stories, or is there something documented in which, like, set a precedent for, like, maybe we should increase this?
I haven't seen anything yet, but.
Yeah. I mean, the tank is a really good example in itself. I was just wondering if there, has been times that we could, kind of feel the pain of, hey, we had to cut a project 3 years ago, because they didn't have it.
Yeah.
Or a grant, we actually missed out on it because we couldn't match it. Those are stories that kind of, tell of why that flexibility would be key. But I'll also realize you guys are just coming in and catching up. I guess I think 2 million is probably a little bit too small. I don't know if it has to be 5, maybe I'm in between, but it does sound like a really, strong, flexible reserve that's not just for emergencies, but be good, I like the idea of it. Especially with grants, like missing out on a free million because you don't have the million to match. I don't know how common that is, but it's a good story. So I'll just go back to, I'm leaning towards the 5, but if there was a number in between, I would, really like to hear it as well.
Please.
Just one follow-up. One thing that I heard that was surprising is that the capital reserve, if I understood correctly, would be used for projects that weren't budgeted. And I guess I had not envisioned that personally. I had envisioned as part of the budgeting process, budgeting the drawdown of the capital reserves and its replenishment. Because I keep thinking that that's what it's there for. Could you help me understand that a little bit more about how that would work? And I think this kind of gets back to this whole thing of what is the capital reserve and how does
So
it work?
we're gonna come to we're gonna start with the engineering committee, and then we're gonna come to the entire board with a prioritization policy, right? And we're gonna have a list of projects, and then we're gonna say, this is the red line for this year because this is the money that we have. Okay. One of these projects down here becomes a higher priority now for something happened. And not an emergency necessarily, but something happened and the district could save money because now we're combining zones or something like that. And it would just make sense to do it now. I don't want to cut these projects because they're important. You dip into your reserve to get that project going now. It wasn't what you budgeted for this year. But the reserve is there, and then you replenish the reserve in the year that it was originally scheduled. That's how we used it in the past.
I see. Gotcha. So that's one application, which I could understand. Could it also be the case that you do budget for the use of the capital reserve just as part of a normal budget year?
You don't normally budget a reserve drawdown. You do a budget amendment to do it because if you're budgeting it. If you're budgeting for it, then technically it should be part of your rate structure. And if it's not, then it's going to be a budget amendment.
I see. I guess I'm just thinking of the situation where you have a grant or an anticipated replenishment over a 2-year budget cycle or that sort of thing.
No, the grant is probably the best example for what you're talking about. We didn't get any grants, if anything, was really one district, so I'm not really, in tune with that one, but maybe I think the city got a few grants, didn't they? So I think Sherry might be able to answer that, but yeah, I think that's a good example of making sure we have that money available that we didn't budget for, that became available now because the state said we have the money, right? So.
Gotcha, thank you.
So I'd be interested, so we have 2 million on the table, 5 million on the table, and you said, well, there's numbers in between. What factors do you use to decide whether it's 2 or 5?
So.
Is it a matter of what a typical couple of unanticipated projects would be? And
That's what I would say, yeah.
so
So if
you're
we took this,
thinking you
if we
need
took this,
5 million for, it seems like 5 million is a little high if that's the.
if we took the tank as an example, it's a $1.5 million tank. And you did 2 of those, it'd be $3 million,
$3 million.
right? So I think minimum of $3 million would be my comfort.
Going.
I think it'd be important in going back to the board to be able to explain how we came up with the number, and it did feel a little arbitrary when you said
Yeah,
that. So maybe, in anticipation of 2 unanticipated capital projects, typically 1.5, or maybe that we need to match a grant, which I would not imagine would be that big. Most grant matching would not be that high, or would not go over 1.5 million anyway. So it seems like 3 million might be a good, then you have a basis for why we want that.
Okay. We can do that.
Yeah, if I could maybe just add to this discussion, I'm sort of coming to the 3 million number myself that Mike sort of suggested. It's somewhere in the middle, and 2 tanks sounds like actually a very plausible scenario. And the reason I like to go away from the 5 million is it is technically a reserve. And if we actually, and we really, I don't think can budget spending the reserve because it's a reserve. And so if we want a little extra cash to to, you know, make that red line go a little lower on the engineering construction list, then it would be better to just have that as available working capital. And if we put it at 3 million, that does add 2 million to the working capital. And just so everyone understands, if the capital reserve were 3 million and we did need to spend it all in 1 year, to replenish it will absorb all of the extra free cash flow for the next year. And so it is a big deal. And it means that engineering is going to have to put off what had been budgeted for that other year. And so the bigger that capital reserve number is, it really means that we kind of have at least a philosophical obligation to replenish it. We can't, you know, just say, oh, we're not going to do it. And so we have to have a way of replenishing it and build it into the next budget cycle. And it obviously has to come from somewhere. So it's going to come from our net income, not profit, right?
And to that end, I mean,
Yeah.
we're setting it now, but it's not chiseled in granite. You know, we can look at it in 3 to 5 years and say, you know, it actually costs more to do these projects now. So we do need to increase it to $5 million.
So I guess I will float the idea of accepting the resolution and make the one modification that the capital reserve be changed to 3 million. And I guess open for discussion here on the board, and then we'll ask the public to comment as well. Brian, what are your thoughts?
I've learned a lot in this conversation, and the way I understand how it works now, I think each round of conversation has enlightened me further, is that what we are essentially talking about, I'm comfortable with the proposition of a $3 million reserve, with the understanding that what a $5 million reserve would essentially do is hold back $2 million more for an unexpected project at the expense of a programmed project.
Exactly.
And that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
so yeah, I'm comfortable with that proposition, and thanks for bearing with me through this learning arc.
All right, Jim, any
Just ditto what Brian just said. I've been learning a lot.
all right, good.
I misunderstood
All right.
a lot
No,
at the
that's,
beginning.
hey, that's why we're
And
talking.
I'm comfortable with 3 million.
3 million, okay. How about you, Jenny?
If the staff and general manager is happy with that number, then that would work for me too. I'm wondering if, you know, we're reducing that amount of what we have to play with there and utilize also maybe potentially an emergency if we want to move maybe a little bit, you know, 500,000, 1 million into the emergency to put that at 5. I mean, I don't know. I'm
Like
a
you said
firm
earlier,
believer in putting away for a rainy day or like whatever.
Yeah, especially rainy days around here.
awesome.
Yeah, that would make me feel maybe a little bit better, but I'm fine with
Okay,
that.
thank you. And Mike?
I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with, you know, we went 2, we went 5, now we're just like kind of like compromising, just throwing out a number 3. And you mentioned like reverse engineering is how 5 came up, and you know, I wish I had a report of some that, like, you know, here is how this is calculated. Because I feel like I'm just kind of like, you know, I'm making a decision here a little bit blind, or, you know, at least giving an advocate. And, you know, 3 could just be like, okay, it's better than 2, so we'll accept it from a side, but like, is it optimal? Like, I have no way of knowing at this juncture, which is a little uncomfortable. You know, but if this is something we have to vote on today, I'm okay with 3 if you guys are comfortable. Just, it seems like everybody is. But next time, or, you know, next time we have something like this, I would like more context in the calculations of something so critical. Even, you know, precedent, you know, other districts who came across this replenishment, you know, strategies, all of it is just something I'd like to read through. But I'm okay with 3 for today.
And I can give you some context. In my previous district, we had a capital reserve goal of $10 million, and it was based on replacing a well, a tank, and a booster.
Okay.
We never achieved it. we were always fluctuating around $2 to $3 million. So
It's a lofty goal.
it was a lofty goal.
Okay. Maybe open it up to the public and then maybe we'll have one more go around to see if there's any other thoughts. Bruce, you're good? Okay. And no one online, Scott?
No.
Okay. Unless there's more discussion, I would like to make a motion and I would like to make the motion for the 3 million. Any more discussion or we good? Okay. Then I would like to make the motion to approve this resolution with the one amendment that the capital reserve be changed from 5 million to 3 million. And otherwise accept it as proposed. Okay, we'll need a
I'll second.
need a second, okay, Jim? All right, and Chair, if you don't mind taking a vote?
Sure. One more moment. Jim Mosher,
Yes.
Bob Gress,
Yes.
Brian Largay,
Yes.
Jenny Gomez,
Yes.
and Mike Galvin.
Yes.
All right,
Motion
great.
passes.
Thank you. That was a very involved, pretty complex issue. I appreciate all the discussion about it. Let's see. Where do there's no more new business. I don't think there's any, well, maybe there's no unfinished business. Informational material is available, the old minutes. Do we have to approve the minutes from last meeting? Do you know?
There are no minutes on the website. I went, I
Oh,
wasn't
really?
here last time, so
Oh.
I went to read them and they were not posted. At least I didn't find them.
Oh, okay. I didn't find them either and just didn't know if I missed them. Okay, so well, if there's no minutes, maybe that's something we'll need to catch up on. Sherry, since you're the
Could be,
secretary
yeah,
today,
We'll have to check with Heather and see.
yeah,
if,
see if she took them
yeah.
or what. And then I guess and I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but I had just some more generic finance questions, if I could ask them. What kind of accounting software are we using for the district?
we're using Springbrook.
Springbrook?
Brooke.
Brook.
Sorry,
Okay, I'm not
I'm new
familiar.
to it.
Okay, okay. And is it capable of producing monthly income statements, balance sheets, and cash flows? Do you know?
It is,
Is it a royal pain?
no, it's not. It is not as robust as systems I have used previously. But it does the job.
Okay. And can it do budgets, monthly, quarterly, let's say at least quarterly? If we as a committee wanted to propose to the board that we take the budgeted amounts for the coming 2 years and flow in the construction projects, that we then are sort of seeing, well, where are we, let's say, quarter by quarter, in terms of, our cash? Is it where we're sort of expecting? Are we spending down? If we have debt, a bond, are we on track with making sure we're not going to get hit with taxes on too much unused interest, that kind of stuff? I know this is a lot to ask, but what are your thoughts just in general on that?
So I know that we provide the financial status report to the board. So would this be something that we just add to that, or are you wanting something directly for the committee itself?
Well, maybe remind me, what's provided to the board? Is it provided then once a month, or is it?
Yes, it's once a month. Normally the second meeting of the month. And it shows the cash.
Shows the cash position, right? Not the cash flow.
Correct.
Okay.
That's all I can think of off the top of my head, and I just did this. But if you're wanting something that's a budget to actuals report, that should be something that I can run very easily in the system.
Okay. Cause I'm just thinking in terms of thinking ahead in the coming months, that might be something for you to maybe kind of put on your radar. Because that would be great to be able to provide it to the budget committee, and of course, the board needs to see that too. But that way we can be, instead of catching up on some of these issues, we can be a little bit ahead of, a little proactive on them. That'd be great. Let's see. Oh, and I also wanted to ask you, who do we bank with?
Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo. Have we ever asked them for a line of credit
Mm,
that you know of? And I don't. Do you know?
Nope.
Because this is kind of to Bruce's point about getting the dry financing, and I wasn't even aware of that we can borrow from the state itself.
Well, it's the utility county and they make arrangements basically.
Okay, so it might be, we should probably do some research on what are the process to get dry financing. But I would love for the district to have, and this is like, again, an emergency source of cash, either for a grant that we need some extra money, or wow, we're really spending more on the emergency fund, to your point, Jenny, that wow, we need 5 million, not 4 million. If we had a line of credit access and the board said, yeah, this is an emergency, we're gonna draw it. And so it costs some money to have that line available, but it might be a reasonable trade-off, you know. It might be 0.5% of the face value or something that might be worth it. So maybe, is that something you could explore with Wells Fargo?
Sure. Do we have cards?
Credit card?
Mhm.
No, Philip Wells Fargo though.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I missed.
Credit
She,
card.
she asked if we had, credit cards.
Oh, credit cards.
Yeah, for
Well,
district.
I'm sure they're not for a big amount, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I haven't tried mine for $1 million.
Your
yet.
$1 million credit line, we'll never see you again.
I know at the city, we had our cards through US Bank. And so the line of credit was open. And so when we did have the earthquakes, I was able to just raise everybody's card limit because they were all set at, I think, 1,000, and I raised them to 10,000, and I said, get what you need if you need it, you know, especially like the chief of police and that sort of thing. So that's something we could look into as well, but yeah, I will definitely do some research on that.
Our cards are actually through CSDA.
What's that?
Our cards are actually through CSDA,
Oh,
California Special District Association.
oh. So oh, interesting. So, yeah, I mean, it would be great if we needed to increase everyone's line, you know, in an emergency. It'd be nice to know that. And it would be nice to know that if it's not too expensive, that we actually have an actual line of credit available.
Mhm.
Just in case. It's always a lot easier, you know, the saying is always a lot easier to get lines of credit and that kind of stuff when you don't need it.
Right.
Right. And so if it's not too expensive, then it's maybe worth pursuing.
Sure.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay, and yeah, that's it for my additional questions. Any other open issues or just other issues? Okay.
Any
Jason,
future agenda items that people want to see brought to the
yeah, any agenda items that anyone wants to?
Not for me.
Okay. All right. And the public, no future agenda items? Okay, then I guess we will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being
Thanks
proactive.
for, yes, thanks for running a good meeting.
All right.
I learned a
Good, that's
lot
good to hear.
about capital